Hello everybody, here we are today and we're going to be doing a season preview for the Utah Hockey Club, talking about whether or not this team can do better in a new environment. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So last season, Utah wasn't even a team as it was the Arizona Coyotes, and then of course they ended up moving to Utah, which was heartbreaking, but they finished the year with 77 points, which wasn't good enough to make the playoffs. That would normally be a little bit disappointing for a fan base, but that's disappointing. But you know what's worse? Losing your team. So, of course, now this is mainly an entirely new fan base, and they are now in an entirely new state. And we get to see whether or not things will go better for them, as the 30 years that were going on in Arizona weren't particularly successful. So what are some storylines for Utah going into the year? So the first storyline will be whether or not the move is a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm going to be looking at this in the short term in terms of how things could be a good thing. For one, I think for a lot of the players that were there for a while, it's probably nice to know that you've already moved. It may seem a little bit weird, but after years of just hearing about how this team was going to relocate and how that was going to be an issue, it's good to just get that out of your system and know that it's probably done and over, as of course they're going to be in theoretically a nice, better stadium than what they had before, as they actually will be. But on top of that too, you have an owner that's invested in a new fan base that I think could really motivate them to possibly be better. I'm not saying anything was bad about the fan base before in Arizona, but there's a passion that a new fan base is probably going to bring that could fuel you for year one, which is why I especially think in the short term, this could be a good move. So if they get off to a good start, you'd have to imagine that they could kind of keep getting things going in terms of momentum, and the fans behind them, all those things would be great. And maybe another pro will be the fact that they could have home ice advantage, maybe not to the extent as a team like Colorado in the Mile High City, but Salt Lake City is relatively high elevation-wise, I do believe, compared to other teams. So maybe that's something that is a good thing for them, which is good. But of course we have to talk about the bad as well. I think one of the things that's bad is the fact that a lot of these players probably aren't thrilled about leaving Arizona. That seems a little bit odd considering how people treated Arizona and the team, and how people just constantly kind of put down an organization that had been in a rut for a long time. But it seemed like the players, after they left and even beforehand, talked about how they really loved the relationship they had with the fan base and that they loved living in Arizona. So that's hard. On top of that too, you have to move yourself, possibly your girlfriend, wife, fiance, whatever, your kids, your dog, you know, get a whole new apartment or house or whatever you're going to do, all while being in a league that is the best in the world with 31 other teams, where the entire team didn't relocate. Maybe a handful of guys did, but these cities have had these teams possibly for over 100 years in the case of like Montreal or something like that. So it's going to have a hard feeling of being able to get over what you lost, while also understanding that everybody else is pretty much in their home state, their home mindset and all that. So that's tough. And then to close things out as well too is the fact that 4 out of the 5 games to kick off the year are on the road. So if this side gets off to a relatively slow start, then you kind of understand that maybe the fans that are a little bit more prone to watching basketball are going to say, I'm not as thrilled with this, because the Jazz have had the sole kind of ownership for the team or professional sports landscape in Utah for a while now. So if this side gets off to a relatively bad start and kind of shows those Arizona roots, if you will, and how things went poorly, then maybe fans aren't going to be like Vegas, where they were swarming and saying, oh my gosh, we've got this great team, the Golden Misfits and whatnot. Instead, we've got a side that looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. And the second storyline is how much can this team improve, which seems a little bit odd because they are relocating, and they were a side that had a 14-game losing streak at one point last season, which is unfortunate because 50-ish games into the year, they looked like they were going to be a fringe wildcard team, maybe making it as a second wildcard. But then, of course, that losing streak just flushed those dreams down the toilet. But anyway, this is a side that was able to be a fringe wildcard team for a bit there, while also closing out the year relatively strong. Over their final 16 games, they went 10-6-0, and were a team that at points wasn't necessarily easy to play. So looking at this side, I feel like there is potential to go and improve off of what they did last year with 77 points, which I actually think was good for them, considering they had 70 points a season prior, and that's where I'm excited for this side. Now, I think with the Central being a very tough division this year, being better may not directly correlate to being higher in the standings or finishing, you know, above 77 points, although I do think the potential is there. The reason I feel that way is because last year I was relatively optimistic about this side too. I said I liked the fact that they had 3 lines that I was pretty impressed with, and then I felt like if they could get out to just a consistent start and have some guys like Clayton Keller be a big name player for them, they would be better, and they were better. And I think this team is in much better position. I think I feel more confident, and this is a side that I was kind of envisioning, but even more so as they look better from what I saw last season, as the blue line looks much much improve. And one thing that I'm really liking here is the fact too that you have Vemelka and you have Ingram back in tandem. So if you have the good front in front of them where things are looking better, and then you have this three lines that could be good for you, and then a tandem that could see an improvement thanks to better defensive improvements in front of them, and just even an improvement in terms of minutes and how things get broken down. These are all reasons why I feel confident. Now, am I going to go out there and say that I feel bold enough to put them in top three in the division? No, I don't, but I do feel like for a side that's kind of built the way they are at the moment, I see them getting into the 80-point range. In fact, I feel like anything below 77 points would be a disaster for this group, and I truly do think that I feel like, somewhere in the low to mid 80s feels relatively realistic for them. I think the biggest problem for them at the moment, though, is they don't have like superstars or a ton of superstars at the moment. They have a lot of young players that look like they could be good. They've got some proven NHL talent. They've got some guys that aren't going to be stars, but have got a decent run. Lawson Krause is one of those names that comes off to mind, where maybe he's not going to be a star, but he has got a lot of experience and has been able to, again, kind of fit into a middle six category, probably more of a third line guy. So I am kind of rambling here a little bit, but these are all reasons why I feel like this could be another improvement and a step forward for this team. And then the third talking point is same name, new city. You're probably thinking that I'm talking about the team and, all that stuff, but I'm not. I'm talking about a name that sounds really familiar, especially for Arizona Coyotes fans, and that is Doan. And in this case, we're going to be talking about Josh Doan, as he was, of course, the son of Shane that achieved a lot in his time with the Coyotes. Maybe they didn't achieve as much as they wanted as a team, but this was a player that played a long time with them, like 20 years with Coyotes, and his son got to play for them in their final season, and that was really impressive. But it wasn't just like, oh, you have a guy that played one game after his dad was a legend for a club. No, Josh looked pretty good in a very small sample size for them last year, as he had 9 points in 11 games. A good chunk of those were at 5-on-5, and I like that too because his numbers at 5-on-5 look good, and I feel really optimistic and positive about this. Yes, there's some things that'll probably go down a little bit. He had 5 goals in 11 games, and his shooting percentage was above 20% that time. I think it was like 21.4, 21.7. Unless he is just an elite goal scorer going forward, right off the bat, that's probably going to dip, and the points are probably going to dip as well. But this is a player that could potentially be a good young building block for them. Not saying he's going to be a star, but he was a second-round pick back in 2021. So clearly they saw something in him. And of course, too, we can't necessarily compare him to his dad because who's going to get to play 21 years in the NHL and have a lot of seasons where you're going to be like a 50-point guy or more? But I am hoping that maybe this name can live on with a new city. Of course, it would have been very special and very unique and a really iconic thing to have the Doan name live on in Arizona and continue to be productive. But maybe in Utah, he can be that next Doan that is part of this continued legacy. So overall, what are my thoughts on the Utah Hockey Club? I don't know if it's the nostalgia of when they were with the Coyotes or they were the Coyotes, and I'm starting to feel a little bit sentimental, but I feel pretty good about where this club is. Yes, I know they're not going to necessarily be a lot of people's playoff picks, but I think from what we're seeing, they're in a decent spot. They've got a lot of these young players that are high-end picks for Arizona. They've got a lot of picks that they've had in recent years, of course, because they were bad, where they're able to get a lot of these picks, and they just stockpiled a lot of these too as well. But they are going to be in a situation where they improved last year, and they probably should improve this year too. And again, their defensive group looks better. They have, again, a lot of these guys have been able to build and grow as players, and they are in a spot right now where there should be more consistency, and there should be a little bit more of a sense of our owner is invested in our future, and we don't have to worry about the day in and day out things of prior to this. And I mean the day in and day out of how dysfunctional things really were as you're trying to find a home for Arizona before, and they just kind of get bounced around and whatnot. But I think with an energized fan base, an owner that is committed, an improved roster that continues to grow and develop, and just where they're at the moment, I feel like this team should be at a point per game pace. So they should probably finish with 82 points on the year. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too carried away here, but I feel like, again, kind of in that mid 80 point range, if that was where they wanted to go, I would be saying, yeah, they should probably set their sights on that. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the Utah Hockey Club this year? I'm hoping that I didn't slip up during the video and say Arizona Coyotes in regards to them, because again, it's going to be a hard thing to break. But anyway, I want to know your thoughts on the new team in Utah, and if you think that hockey in Utah will work. Let me know those thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, all right.
Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.